So we on?
We are live.
Cool. I'll try and stay on screen. So I am here with Caroline, who very kindly agreed to be interviewed for my project, which it's a combination of, it started off as Project 100 Love, where I'm interviewing people, 100 people who love what they do. And that's it. That's the only criteria. It doesn't matter what you do or who you are, or where you come from. As long as you love what you do and that you make a living doing it, I want to speak with you. So I was delighted when my friend Craig referred Caroline, and I'm sitting here. We don't know each other. We've never met before.
I know, we met like 5 minutes ago,
Yeah.
right?
And this is my first time doing Facebook Live.
Yes, we are popping Rachel's cherry. And I was saying before we got live with you that I love finding edges for people to explore. So thank you for being a yes.
You definitely found one of mine, so that's for sure. But already it feels good, so I'm okay.
So because my audience doesn't know you very well, can you just share a little bit about you, your full name, and where you're from, and how you landed up starting this project?
Absolutely. So I'm from Dublin, Ireland. My name is Rachel O'Connor, and I have been living in California just 5 years, but I've been in the States for over 20. And I often tell people I saved the best to last because I love California. I was in New York for a long time and Seattle for a short time. I started this project on March 22 on the spring equinox. And
potent time to start the growth.
And the goal was to interview 100 people in 100 days. So I missed the 100-day mark.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Tantra's break rules, so it's fine to let that go.
That was just a little structure I put in place, but it wasn't really what was important. What's important is speaking to people and really getting in touch with what drives them, what motivates them, what they get up for in the morning and have joy around. So it's been an amazing project on so many levels. I have not, very early on, I realized that I had hit on something really, really special. And just being in the presence of people who are present to that love that's in their life has been so uplifting for me. And I was saying to you earlier, it's just been generating itself over and over and over again. So I've done over 60 interviews to date.
That's amazing.
It's awesome. It's absolutely awesome. Yeah.
And so lovely that you're getting to connect with something so positive.
Yeah. Because
I really believe, I do a lot of affirmation practices, and that shifts how you feel.
Absolutely.
And if we just fill our consciousness with what's on the news all the time, that's going to make anybody depressed.
Yeah.
But you're connecting to what motivates people and inspires them to get up every day.
It surprises me every time how much, and what I feel as well, that connection with people is, it always comes during the interview that there's this sense of deep knowing and deep connection, because whatever container that has been created with this, people are showing up so authentically and so vulnerably. It completely humbles me every time. Yeah, it's beautiful. So,
well, I'm delighted and honored to be included.
Great.
And that we managed to find the right time to connect.
Good.
So,
okay.
Yeah, I want to hand over more to you.
Sure.
I'm used to being in the driving seat, but I'm gonna surrender.
Good. I love it.
I'll do my best too.
So, I start off with one question. I only have one question that I know I'm going to ask, and then the rest just flows in the conversation. Okay. So the question is, what is it that you love about what you do?
Well, perhaps I should start with what I do, because some of the people know and some people don't know, and I I know we're meeting for the first time, so
Sure,
I'm
whatever
going
way you want to do
I'm
it.
going to share it from that place first. So probably the thing I'm most passionate about in my world is both Tantra yoga and Bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga being the yoga of devotion, which often includes lots of chanting, right? And then Tantra, because I had spent a lot of time being a seeker in different spiritual paths, but they kept telling me that sex was wrong. And while Tantra isn't only about sex, I practice a lot of Neo-Tantra. And what's exciting about that is all of us gets to be sacred, including our sexuality. Like, we don't have to leave that off. And can I just roll with?
Sure.
With
you roll.
Where you're going. So people have been telling me for years that I should try Tantra and to see what it was like. And I was quite busy, and I was already very sex positive. Do I need to explain what sex positive is, or does that make sense?
I can guess, but...
Right, so it's very open-minded around my own sexuality, around others. I had moved in the BDSM world, for example, and I've been practicing polyamory for 13 years now. So I love alternative communities and alternative ways, excuse me, of self-expression. Which makes the Bhakti very interesting, because they tend to be a little more conservative. But so I kind of discovered it by accident. I connected with somebody at a workshop experience that I was at up in Southern Oregon in the middle of nowhere. And once we started playing with the energetics, it ignited my body and my whole experience of what intimacy and connection could even be. And I came back to the Bay Area going, I have to learn more about this. Like, what do I do? And initially, I thought I was going to learn through this person, but I ended up meeting somebody else, and we dived into a tantric relationship for 9 months.
Okay.
And I thought I was just getting very distracted by all this amazing sex that I was having. And I'd already been exploring. I've always been into personal growth. I grew up in a pretty dysfunctional family, so working on myself felt very important to make sure that I didn't make the same mistakes that my parents had made. And I thought for a while I'd be a therapist. And then I thought I'd be a life coach. And I spent about 2 years looking at different programs around the Bay and trying to figure out what would be the best choice for me. And then I kept getting distracted by all this good sex. And I was like, what is this? And I remember going to, I won't name the school, but there's a school in San Rafael that's one of the best in the world for coaching. They're world-renowned corporate coaches. And I arrived, and I was just, it felt dead to me. And there wasn't anything wrong with their program. I was just so ignited by what I was doing with Tantra. And I took a pretty deep dive. I was with this person I was connecting with was a Tantra teacher in his own right, but quite new. So he wanted to practice a lot.
Okay.
And I was very happy to be his practice partner. And we started doing some sexual healing, working with, are you familiar with the chakras?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So for those who don't know, chakras are energy centers in the body. And if that's too woo for you, I speak a lot of woo, but they're nerve ganglions at different centers in the body. And the second chakra is focused around the genitals, and that holds a lot of emotion for people. And as a trauma survivor myself, the layers of trauma that I thought I'd already healed, there was more to release and let go. So initially it was just an exploration for myself. And after 6 months, he said I needed to go and study with his teacher, which I did, and then signed up for the teacher training right away. And even then I was not convinced I was going to be teaching Tantra at all. I was running another business totally. I'd come from corporate, very corporate, like Merrill Lynch. Right. You can't get more corporate than private equity and hedge funds. But I wasn't motivated enough by the money. Like, I wasn't interested in just moving papers and making somebody else rich. And when I saw what a huge impact this had on my life, and then I started doing energy work with people and touching bodies and seeing them come alive and be released from the things that were holding them back, I could just feel this stepping into my own dharma and my own life path. And even then I was like, well, I really don't think I'm ultimately going to do this. I'm really still going to focus on the coaching. But the universe had other ideas.
Interesting. I love how that happened.
In store, yes.
Yeah, beautiful. You know what's coming up for me is when we talk about the chakras and the second chakra and the sexuality, it's also the creativity center.
Yes.
So is that something that you could address in terms of sexuality and your creativity?
Yes. Well, I'm going to talk about it in terms of my business. If that
would be wonderful.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
Because I've actually always had a pretty, and we didn't discuss that I might be talking about sex quite a lot on this interview, so I hope that's okay. Anyway, so I've always had quite a high sex drive, but I noticed when I first launched this business, there was a lot of creation. I was building websites and creating programs, and a lot of my creative life force went into that. And I noticed my sex drive went down a little, and I was like, what is that about? And I realized it was just another way of expressing this energy. And the second chakra was being able to be utilized just in that energy channeled in a different way. And I think for all of us that can ebb and flow at different ages or stages of our lives. But so it certainly rebounded and gone around in circles, but using the creativity, it's part of what I love about this work. No one day is the same. No session I do is the same. Some of the programs, have similarities to them, but it's always dependent on who's in the room and what's happening with the energy and which challenges are coming up for the participants that we're working with. And I think that's part of what keeps me so engaged, because I get to really make a difference in people's lives. And that's so, it's also exhausting sometimes, right? Well, it can be, because in the beginning I had this story that I had to go and help everybody in the world. And that's not possible. And that can be really depleting. So I had to realize I just get to show up for the things that I'm a yes to, and then find people that are a yes to that too. Yeah.
So this, for
Did that
me,
answer your question?
This is just beautiful.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you. Yeah. The answering what you are being called to, that requires a lot of being present. Okay, so that's that training in really being aware, and that comes with your bhakti practice, I'm sure, and the Tantra as well.
Right.
So at what point, like when you were overly extending yourself? And then
see, now you're finding my edge. When I was overextending myself.
Was there a moment where what was that transition into this more present way of being?
I think there are a lot of ways to answer that question. And one is the way I hold Tantra is that it's not just one of my taglines for my business is walking Tantra out of the bedroom and into the world. So everything ultimately becomes this tantric practice. We're not just limiting it to one place. So while there was plenty of presence in service to other people, holding space for them in workshops or being exquisitely present where I touched their body, for example, it was often the loop was going out, right? It was all about giving, which is a beautiful thing, but you've got to make sure that there's this infinity loop flowing back and forth. And I'm quite stubborn. And I was very excited about this work, so I literally worked myself to exhaustion, to adrenal fatigue, until my body just shut down and said, you're not listening to the subtle whispers anymore. I'm going to take you out. I actually said this to one of my energy teachers. She said she had limits, and her name is Linda Cassara. She's incredible. And I was like, how do you have limits? And the minute I said that, the universe said, great, let me show you how many limits you have. And so I had adrenal fatigue, and then I manifested a car accident because I still wasn't slowing down enough. But that was the universe hitting me with the 2x4 saying, you need to pay attention to you too. So that was a big wake-up call. And I'm obviously not in my 20s anymore, no matter how young I feel inside. And you just can't keep abusing your body like that. And I realized I was teaching all these techniques and then not being present with my own feelings.
That's huge.
That was huge. I was stopped at a traffic light one day going, oh, like, I'm not living the Tantra that I wanted. I'm practicing it, but I'm not integrating that into my everyday life. Yeah. So that was very humbling to realize that.
So tell me about the difference that you're finding now with that shift having come, and you're in it now, in this way, this new way of being.
Yeah, well, I had to make, I'd say it was probably a 2-year journey to really restructure my life. I'd been working 100 hours a week, and I'm talking about teaching Tantra.
Wow.
And I was used to that, and coming from corporate, it was so driven in private equity. I just thought that's what you did, right? Yeah. And I think that's often the message that people get in the West is we've got to push, we've got to work harder, we've got to extend ourselves more.
Yeah.
And so I had to look at how much I was teaching. I had to get much clearer in my boundaries. Even with my son, I had to say to him, I can't be on anymore. It's your bedtime, and mommy needs a break. And that can be hard for us as parents to say. I've also gotten much more honest, both with myself and with my colleagues. I teach with a wonderful lady, Julia Tyndall. We run a Tantra school together, and we just finished leading our Sarasa Tantra group facilitated training to train Tantra teachers. And we're learning now that both of us don't have to be intensely present at every single moment of the 5-day, it's 2 5-day trainings. Like when she's teaching, I can go for a walk in the forest or take a nap or just like not be on. And to be more gentle with ourselves, to give ourselves permission. A friend of mine, Marsha Baginski, who is one of the co-founders of Cuddle Party, she said to me, Caroline, you're self-employed. If you're tired, you can take a nap. Yeah. And I was like, I needed permission to stop being so hard on myself.
That image of you coming from Maryland, the corporate world, and just doing the same thing in the world of Tantra,
right, is
hilarious, really, isn't it? That you don't, you change the environment, but you bring the same way of being to it, which really means nothing has shifted.
I think that there's light and shadow to everything.
Okay.
So the shadow is, yes, if in any facet of life, and to any entrepreneurs or solopreneurs, like, it's tricky in the beginning because you are launching a business, and we both live in the Bay Area, and it's reputedly one of the most expensive cities to live in the world, right? So yes, you have to push yourself, and I love the drive that I got from the corporate world and the left brain and the way to be able to market and put myself out there unapologetically in the world and not be afraid to charge what I'm worth, right? And I watched so many of my friends and colleagues really struggle with that. They're brilliant at what they do, and they have no idea how to make it a success.
Right.
So I think that that's the light side. And then the shadow side, and this is true again, I think, for so many women today, because we want to have equal rights, and we want to be seen as, fight for equal pay and be successful in the workplace, we end up running our energy often in a very masculine or in a yang way. And this inviting ourselves back to drop into the yin, or the more receptive place, and allow ourselves to receive. I think that's a journey for all of us.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think our whole life becomes a workshop to teach us the lessons we need. So I would have liked it if I listened to some of the messages earlier.
Right.
I could have saved myself a lot of time, energy, therapy bills, doctor's bills, for example.
Yeah.
But maybe that at that point was the only way I was willing to surrender and learn.
Yeah.
And to kind of do a 180 and shift. So take the gems from what I'd learned in corporate and leave behind that which didn't serve.
Nice.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I have a lot to say about this, obviously. So I want to add in one more piece. Like, I felt when I was trained as a Tantra teacher, I was taught all these really advanced techniques, but I wasn't given a lot of the foundations. Like, people kind of mentioned vaguely self-care. And I now drill that into my students because I'm like, how do you support other people if you're not getting nourished? You know, I have to be receiving Tantra sessions if I'm going to give them. I go and spend 2 hours a week in therapy, like having somebody listen to my shit and exploring. Can I say that on your interview? I think your recording is just for you. So but I need to explore my shadow. I often say to my students, I'm working 10 times harder than you are to be able to hold for you. Because how do I invite somebody else into the depths of their shadow or their shame experience? And I didn't realize that about sexuality, that it's really dealing with a lot of people's shadow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So while that isn't that for me sexuality is a playground. I have plenty of other things that are parts of my shadow.
Right.
So I have to be committed to looking at that.
Yeah. One of the things I had a quick look at your website before we came together, and on your blog you say no one teaches you how to have good sex.
Right.
Which was an interesting concept for me. I never quite thought of it in that way. So do you consider yourself a teacher of good sex? Or how do you frame it? Or what is it for you?
Well, if I simplify it, the 3 titles that I use are Certified Tantra Educator, because that's one of the trainings that I did. So the main lens that I look through is Tantra. I use the word Dakini, and I can drop a link in for those of you later. But a Dakini is somebody, it comes from the Hindu tradition, which is where Tantra comes from. And it's a holder or a keeper of the energies. And it's somebody normally who's doing pretty deep work on an individual with the full scope of Tantra at their fingertips. And that can include diving into sexuality. And sometimes that's about using mantras to empower their voice and helping them find their yes or their no. I work, for example, with a lot of trauma survivors who've had their boundaries crossed and violated over and over again.
Right.
So then going slow enough for them to really listen in to what's a yes and what's a no, and be able to have choice. And then I also, I do coaching. So one of my other titles is a conscious relationship and intimacy coach. And I include that because I actually straddle both the Tantra world and the sex educator world quite a lot. And the reason I do that is because so often in the Tantra world we're using, and this can be true in any industry, but it's very common in the Neo-Tantra world, which is most of what I practice, that people are using so much jargon and kind of an airy-fairy language, like, let's expand into ecstatic bliss. Like, what is that? Like, that doesn't even mean anything, really. So, like, how do we get there? And so I talk about very real things, and I often use the Sanskrit words to use the energetics of those and to bring the honoring, both of the tradition and the person. But, like, let's be real and talk about what's real for people. And when I studied in India, I was studying with one of the leading Sanskrit and Tantra teachers in India, in Varanasi. And I came back thinking, wow, well, maybe I've got this all wrong. Like, a lot of my focus is around sex. And, you know, in India, they don't focus on sex that much, even though he talked about ejaculation control in the master classes we were in, which blew me away. But I realized in the West, this is where we're meeting people. This gets them in the door. So if I can
Right,
promise
okay.
somebody that they can quadruple their orgasm just by breath and sound alone. And they can do that. I actually had one of my assistants, she assists at many of my events, and she's heard me say that in class, and we practiced it in class, and she messaged me very excitedly the other day. She's like, Caroline, it actually works. And I'm like, uh-huh. So if you tell somebody that they're going to quadruple their orgasm, then they'll do the pranayama or the breathwork practice.
Right.
But if you say just breathe more deeply or just do this technique, most people, the Westerners are not used to practices necessarily like that, or many aren't.
Yeah, yeah.
Most people will walk in the door if they can find out how to become a better lover.
Right. And do you think there's a change over, how long have you been doing this work?
6 years.
6 years.
Mm-hmm.
In that time, so it's only really a short,
right.
pretty short amount of time, but do you think, is there an embarrassment for people to say that they need help with sex? That it's actually, that may be a hard way for them to get in the door, because they're saying, actually, there may be something that could be better at the very least.
I think that's probably individual, like depending on the person. I do, because sexuality carries so much shame for people. Some people only want to come and work with me one-on-one. And for example, when I've gone and been on tour in Boston, like they don't even want me to greet them on the street, because they don't, even though nobody would know who I am, right?
Yeah,
they're like, we have to go inside, don't hug me here.
Right. Wow.
And I'm happy to meet them wherever they are, but it's interesting to watch the shift. So there's that end of the spectrum. And then there's a class I don't currently have on my schedule, but called Polishing the Penis, Mind-Blowing Techniques of Erotic Massage. And I didn't warn you. At least you saw the website before we started talking about this. But, I use the word penis specifically because if I use the word lingam, which is the Sanskrit word.
Oh, okay.
Right. Like, for example, you didn't know. So if I put that in the title, only tantrikas would know that.
Right.
And I want as many people as are interested to have access to this work.
Right.
So I actually created that class to have men's pleasure, or people with penises have their pleasure honored.
Right.
Without that having to be a shameful thing.
Right.
But what I saw is so many people were like, wow, we get to come and do this and learn. And I often say in that class, our arms get really tired if we do this motion for more than 5 minutes. So I'm going to teach like 12 techniques at least, so you can move and do different things to excite your partner and awaken their whole body. So while they're certainly going to be empowered around sexual techniques, mostly what I'm teaching is presence, intimacy, and connection. Because it's actually, for me, the kind of meditation I teach is very dynamic, very embodied meditation. So it doesn't look like classical meditation, but I can offer puja or worship to a person's body, even as I touch their whole body. And that for me is bridging this link between regular life and meditation, because everything can become the meditation. Walking down the passage can be the meditation.
Yeah. And
so I think it varies.
The techniques that you use and the different things that you use, I'm guessing from what I've heard from you, are drawn from all your different paths of learning and growth, and correct?
Absolutely. Well, I remember I finished working at Merrill Lynch 13 years ago, right before, I hope it's okay, I'm talking about Merrill Lynch on Facebook Live. Anyway, it's all over my LinkedIn profile. But I finished working there 13 years ago, and I remember thinking, what am I doing? I'm wasting my time. Like, I was very good at what I was doing, but it didn't move me yet. Now I know it was totally preparing me to run this business, because I have a business mind and I know how to talk to my audience. So when I have fund managers come and see me for sessions, I understand what their world is like. I know what it's like to be with lawyers. I know how to talk to the techie guys in the South Bay. And if I had just been in the Tantra world, I think that would be difficult.
Yeah.
And I've been playing with energy for years. I've been a yogi for years. Even traveling the world. I remember I spent 3 years of my life traveling, and my mom said at one stage, she said, I wonder what it's going to be like for you when you stop traveling and you slow down to be on this deeper inner journey. So what I notice about most of our lives is actually it's leading us along the path all the way along, even though we're not sure how those dots are going to connect.
Yeah.
And something I found, which is quite woo, but very successful in my work and in my life, is to listen for that place of yes. And so when I feel, and I spend a lot of time cultivating my intuition, when I feel that place of yes, even if I have no idea how it's going to happen or work out, I listen to Spirit's whisper. Deepak Chopra talks about this. He's like, often it's just a little whisper. It's not a loud booming voice.
Yeah.
But the more we pay attention, the louder that voice can come.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's how I birthed a whole Tantra school, was going, I really feel a yes to this, even though who am I to run a Tantra school? Right?
Right.
But I was seeing so much dysfunction in the Tantra world, and a lot of lack of integrity and people getting hurt and harmed. And I couldn't control what other schools were doing. And I realized if I trained my own students, I could hold them accountable. That I could do. So I went, okay, well, I'm a yes for integrity. I'm a yes for accountability. So let's start. And it's been amazing what's followed.
So I'm going to draw us back to the love.
Thank you. Oh yeah, let's come back to the love.
Just the love of what you do. And what I'm hearing is these kind of paths that are all coming back. Do you feel that you are now in this moment, or have been for a while, of, I suppose, a big yes, that this, everything has come together in this moment? And for me, when I'm in this kind of space, for me, it's often clarity. It's all things are just very clear. There's nothing else going on. Would you say that is what's coming up through you now, and that is why you love what you do?
Again, I could answer that so many ways. For me, it's a continuous process of the unfolding, and the vision continues to get clearer and clearer. And with me having a settling into who I know I am in the world and this dharma that I'm walking out. But I'm a recovering perfectionist, still probably in the early stages of that. And what I notice, my therapist works with me on all these unrelenting standards that I have. What I notice is sometimes we have to be a little imperfect when we put ourselves out there. Yeah. And I have a lot of passion for this practice and how it's changed my whole life. It's changed where I live in the world, my relationships, the way I raise my son, like how I make my livelihood, the kinds of flexibility I have in my life and my world. And that's not totally defined, because I have an idea where I'm going in 5 years. And I don't have every single piece of the puzzle worked out. There's another lovely quote I like from Deepak Chopra that I'm probably about to butcher, but it says, it's from 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, I think it is. Anyway, he says, relinquish your attachment to the known and step into the unknown, because when you do that, you step into the field of pure potentiality. And when you know exactly what's happening next week or next year, you shut out this whole range of possibilities. Yeah. So it's a both and. Yeah. There's like a seatedness in what I'm being and doing and offering, and ideas that have been germinating for quite a long time. Yeah. And then there's still more. I don't have all the answers to the path. Yeah. Yeah. So for me, it's both and. Yeah. Not at the end yet. You know?
Oh, sure. Sure, but it's just in this moment, is this the right place for you?
Oh, yeah.
Right now, in this moment. Because yes, you know, certainly doing this work, it is about creating possibility and just being in this presence. But you can be in the presence in a corporate job, and as you say, it isn't right. It isn't feeling.
Well, it might be right for some people.
No, I'm talking about you.
Okay.
When you said at that point, it just wasn't.
Well, I even tried again. When there was a crash, I think it was in 2008. Yeah. And I was married at the time, and like I'd had my son, and I hadn't been working for 2.5 years, and I had to just find a job really quickly. And people were like, well, people were working last week. Why should we hire you? Yeah. So I just went back into what I knew, which was corporate. And it showed me, I just kept hitting my head against the wall with how awful it was and how my creativity was stifled and who I was. Like, as you can tell, I'm a pretty expressive person.
Yeah,
and, you know, when we met, I like had already launched in for a hug with you. And then I was like, are you a yes to a hug? And when people at work would ask me in the corporate world, like, so, you know, how was your weekend? I would actually answer the question, and they didn't want an answer. And I'm like, well, don't ask me the question if you don't want to know. I didn't dump all my stuff on them, but I wanted to tell them. So the box was a little too confining for me. But again, stepping into this work, which I just feel so strongly is what I'm called to do, having some of those linear pieces, like I used to coach people on scheduling, so that's really easy for me. I can vision my Tantra business out. I can tell you what I'm doing mostly till the end of next year. Now, some people in my industry are figuring it out like month by month. Yeah. So there's the both and I have quite a good crossover left and right brain. Yeah. So to be in the energy in a session and really tracking what's happening with the chakras and where I'm directing the energy, and also from the psychological perspective, noticing what's arising, what trauma triggers are showing up. Yeah. Where do I have to pause and be mindful when I'm going to drop words in to imprint in the energy system.
That's beautiful, because I can just see it all.
Thank you. Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
This is why I was yes to talking with you, because this is my favorite thing in the world to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I probably make people sick of hearing from me, because I want to share it so much.
Well, my experience has been, I think people love hearing about people who love doing what they do, because it's infectious. It's like, and on this journey of mine in the various interviews, like I wanted to do 5 or 6 different things just from talking to people that I would never have thought of before. It's kind of like, oh wow, that sounds really interesting.
Right.
Just by the nature of how the person is showing up in that, because it lights them up so much. So no, I think, and it's also, my experience has been that it's very easy to have this kind of interview because people want to talk and they're just, and it's great for me. I just kind of
follow the energy.
Yeah, and see where it's going and what occurs. And well,
it's something I do to actually inspire myself. I like to watch things on screen more than books, or be in a workshop and have an embodied experience. But I love watching documentaries about people's life journeys, and especially really successful people, Oprah or Steve Jobs, or I'm going to try and remember, it was a US gymnast, Gabby Douglas, the Gabby Douglas story. Now, I am never going to be an Olympic gymnast. Right. That's very clear. But watching what their passion is, right, and what inspires them to get up every day, and when they get to the points in the Gabby Douglas story, for example, she's like moved away from her family as like a young teenager to study with the best coach or train with the best coach. And then she just gets to her breaking point and she's like, I just can't anymore. And she even says, I'm giving up. And her mother is like, you are not giving up now. Like people come around and rally to support her. And I watch those movies, those things, I mean, in general, but especially on the darker days, on the days when I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I working so hard, or giving so much, or riding all these edges with people? yeah, why am I getting on a plane and traveling to create bliss for everybody else? And then you remember, then you go back to looking at how things change the world.
Yeah.
And I love doing things that are actually making a difference for people.
Yeah, so that you see the impact that you can have. And
well, when people come up to me at my events and they're like, we had no idea this existed. We've been looking for something like this our whole lives. Or they come to one workshop and they're like this. I have a class called Awakening the G-Spot and Female Ejaculation. And a couple, they were on the verge of divorce and they came to the class and they said this changed our whole relationship. Wow. And that was in one day.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's powerful stuff.
Right?
Yeah.
So that you have to have something. You have. Steve Jobs says this. He says something about. Again, I didn't write all these quotes down, but like you have to really be passionate about what you're doing, because otherwise, no person would get up and do this crazy making every day. So you really have to love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sure you've interviewed. I'm going to be all excited to see this project at the end with all the different people. But it doesn't really matter, I think, what your passion is. But do that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're an amazing gardener or landscape artist, do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe you're an incredible butler. Or
I interviewed a waiter, and he was one of my favorite interviews.
What was amazing about that?
Just the art of it and his bringing himself to it. And one of the things that he said was he never gets into the pat of, the server's pat of what you say. It's like every day is a new opportunity to have a new conversation, and every table is a new set of people. So he comes in with that fresh eye, and again, it's back to being present. He is just present. Right. And if you can bring that, and I think you can be present in something that is in alignment with who you are, because if you're not, you don't want to be present.
Yeah.
That was my experience. I numbed myself for years in a job that wasn't in alignment with my creativity and who I am. So, yeah. So I get to be present with people who are present. And that is joy. Yeah.
It is. That for me, I'm weird with the things that turn me on. People being present is a big turn on for me, because I love being, then you can really dance on that knife edge. Yeah. And people breathing consciously. I always say to my students, I'm like, that's what turns me on. Breathe deeply. That gets me excited. So I'm just weird and geeky about my Tantra like that.
So awesome.
Yeah.
I'm drawn to ask you about that moment, and I'm going to say moment, but when you said enough with the corporate, because that's a big deal.
Yeah,
that's a risky move.
Yep.
So what was that like for you?
Well, there was somewhat of a transition. I think so I was working in corporate, and then I left that and I started a business as a professional organizer, which was in my skill set. I was very good at it, but I wasn't very passionate about it. I'd grown up with an OCD mother. So, I had the skill set that had been drilled into me. But the part that I noticed I was enjoying was the psychology behind things and what caused. I worked with hoarders, and I remember going, so one side we had hoarders, and on the flip side I remember going to someone's house in the South Bay, and everything looked perfect. And she's like, oh, my cupboards are terrible, I need you to fix them. And I was like, I don't even know what to do for you. Yeah. But the juice was all in the emotional pieces for me. So the transition in some ways started happening slowly, and I took a client in Palo Alto that needed 20 hours a week of my time. And, I was only working 40 hours a week those days. Europe has much healthier standards, right, than the US around work ethic. Anyway, and he was also an entrepreneur, but quite eccentric. And we'd had a big visioning meeting on a Thursday afternoon. And I walked back into work on Monday and he said, I don't have any more money. I can't. And we'd visioned like the next 6 months of work time with his 2 other assistants, right? And then he said, I have no more money. I can't pay you. And I'd already slowly started building things towards the business, but I hadn't officially taken the jump. And I remember driving back over the San Mateo Bridge home. And I called my boyfriend at the time and I'm like, I guess this is the universe saying it's time to take the leap. But it was very scary because, you know, I wasn't generating a lot of income to make it work. And I was like I'm ready and I'm so not ready. But I think sometimes we need that because otherwise we never let go of the safety. I mean, maybe other people do, but I'm quite stubborn, as I mentioned earlier on in this video. So that was kind of the push and the impetus. And I remember having people, the very first time I taught a white Tantra class, which is individual practice of breath, meditation, and visualization and mantra. And I put my cards down on the table, and that was quite a big thing. And he was actually a friend of mine, and he walked in and he said, oh, you'll never succeed. There are too many coaches and there are too many workshop leaders in the Bay Area. And that was so motivating because I'm like, I'm going to show you how successful I will be. And you've kind of got to have that tenacity, I think, especially if you're self-employed, because there isn't a guaranteed paycheck at the end of every month.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you've got to make the appointments. You've got to organize things. Otherwise, nothing happens and the debt just piles up. So
I think that comes from that deep sense of knowing that you're on the right path, though. Because I know for myself, I've gotten knocked down by people just saying things before and retreated because, oh yeah, they're right, I can't. But now if someone were to tell me today not to continue doing this and what I'm doing, it would be, you know, whatever.
Right.
That's fine for them, but I know. So
you know within yourself, this is it.
Yeah. That there's something here to what you're doing. Yeah.
Well, I also notice I now wake up most days. I'll be 100% honest. Most days. Some days I'm tired, but like really excited about what's going to happen that day.
Yeah.
And I remember when I lived in London working on the hedge fund, and I really didn't care. A lot of people really care about money that are in finance, and that's okay if that's your jam. But it wasn't that important to me. So I'm like, why am I putting myself through this? Yeah. I don't like numbers. I don't care about the money very much. Like the people, most of them, and I'm divorced, but like they weren't living lives. They were watching screens. Like even at home, they had 6 or 7 screens that they were watching if the markets shifted. And I'm like, I don't even get a lunch break. I have no life, and I'm so stressed out when I get home. I'm crying myself to sleep. Like that's not life. It doesn't matter that I'm wearing Christian Dior. Like nobody cares. Yeah.
And when you wake up and you're excited about the day, do you know that you're excited about your day?
Well, for me, it's a lot of the motivation to get up and do, because, you know, it looks like a very glamorous life. I travel a lot. I get to do really fun and exciting things that most people wouldn't even assume was work. And there's, you know, I got to do all the back end stuff as well. Probably 50% of what I do is marketing. And that's like being on Facebook or running my YouTube channel or doing all these pieces, creating a mailing list. Like nobody told me how to do that. I had to figure that out myself. So I think that the yes and the excitement and the drive, that helps you when you've got to deal with things that are probably not the most exciting. You know, and something that's been a really big project of mine has been trying to address the lack of integrity and the lack of ethics in the Tantra world. That is not an easy thing. That's been consuming a lot of my energy over the last few months, and to sit with people that unfortunately have been traumatized in sessions and then confronting teachers, and like you really have to want to do this because people have questioned my motives. Like, why am I speaking out? Do I have some selfish motives? And I make sure I have accountability people and a supervisor and my energy teachers really keeping me on track. But this path is not for the faint of heart. right? So you really have to want to do it. And there are amazing gifts and benefits, but like with anything, I mean, a pro cyclist has to get up and cycle in the rain, whether they feel like cycling or not.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Tennis player or the pro basketball players, they go and shoot hoops.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that side of things in terms of the, you know, the shadow side of that, of the Tantra world, and what it's the what's the word I'm looking for? The abuse is maybe too strong.
It's not too strong, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's not. You're being very polite, but yeah, they can be, and you know, it's even edgy to talk about that. But this was. I was already working as a Dakini, working with people in very intimate places in their sexuality before I realized it was even shadow work, because it wasn't that for me. And I have plenty of other trauma, but I don't have sexual trauma. And it's actually kept me in awe of this work and how much respect we have to have for it. Because it's funny, I'm having something jump in from one of the fund managers. He said to me one day, like, Caroline, part of why I work so hard is because we're not counting beans. Like, this is people's pension funds and people's livelihood. Like, the decisions I make every day deeply affect people's lives. And it's a similar thing in Tantra, where they're like, if you mess up or if you cross somebody's boundaries. I literally spoke to somebody yesterday who was traumatized by a provider, and she's having to go and do therapy, and that makes me so sad. So I can't control the whole world, no matter how hard parts of me try, but I can make my own difference in the world, and I can train my own teachers and invite them into more integrity, and invite them to look at their own shadows, and talk about what integrity looks like, because there isn't a governing board. So yes. And for a while, people were suggesting maybe I should be on a board. I know that that's not where my yes is. Okay. I am happy to support in the background some of that, but that's my yes, is to train people that are going to help light more fires in the world. So, awesome. Yeah.
I love it. I think that feels pretty perfect to me there.
Thank you. Can I say one more thing?
Of course. You know, I always end with, is there anything else?
Oh, well, there we go.
Here we are.
You were saying a little earlier something about, like, and I might be using my own words, but how did you know when you were all in, when this was what you were going to do with the rest of your life? And when you decide to talk about sex, in many ways you have to make quite a big commitment if you're going to use your own name, which I do, because if I tried to, for example, go and get a corporate job right now, they would look at that and that wouldn't resonate. It wouldn't work in that world. So I had to make a very conscious decision. How public do I want to be? How all in do I want to be with this? And while I decided that I didn't want to use a separate name, if I was going to invite my students to be as authentic as they can be, and to be as real and transparent and share their deepest truths, I wanted to show up as who I am. I put on makeup for you and I today, but normally I don't even teach with makeup because I don't even want that filter there. Okay. Right? Yeah. So I have plenty of imperfections come out even in the room. And so it was this very conscious decision, like, if I say yes to this, I am all in. Yeah.
And that's a declaration, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Very powerful, energetic declaration.
I love it.
Oh, this has been so fun. So I just want to speak to the audience for a second. I know we haven't, somebody commented earlier saying, oh, you know, why are you ignoring the audience? The design for this was really for you and I to have a chat. And I'm just so blessed, Rachel, that you were yes to doing this on Facebook Live.
Yes.
I get asked quite often, like, how did you get into this? What do you do? And I just really felt like people would find their own yeses and see themselves as we talked today, which was a big part of why I wanted to do this. And we're going to pop the link for your project up on Facebook as well.
Right.
I didn't tell you at the beginning that 5,000 of my closest friends around the world, Rachel was already nervous, so I didn't want to make her more nervous, are going to have access to this video. But I'll check back for your questions and do my best to answer them afterwards. You've heard me talk about my Tantra school, and the links are already there for Sarasa Tantra, which I run with Julia Tyndall. We have a retreat this weekend at Sierra Hot Springs, and if you send me a personal message, I can send you the link for that. We have just a couple of spots left. And my mentorship program is really where I love empowering people to step into the fullness that Tantra and working in private sessions has to offer. It's my most advanced training, and it's by invitation only. I take a maximum of 10 students, and I've actually upgraded and redesigned the program since last year. So if you're interested in learning more about some of the ways you can support and empower other people's lives and wake up every day knowing you're genuinely making a difference, feel free to send me a message and I can let you know what the pathway is to that. So thank you again.
Thank you.
And I'm going to
Thank you
take
so
you
much.
off the ledge now, and we're going to end the video. Thanks so much, you guys. Bye-bye.